There we go. Hello. Welcome to another SBA Live with myself. I'm Matt Van Dremelen. I am the owner and founder of Full Circle Aftercare. And with Nikki. Nikki, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Nikki Schmutz. I'm the Director of Operations and I manage our accounts here at Full Circle. I wear many hats, as does Matt, and we make sure this business goes around and we help families. So.
That's right. And happy Halloween to everyone tomorrow.
Yeah, happy Halloween.
Yeah, it's a good time to be talking about this stuff. I don't know if identity theft is something that is scary enough for Halloween, but it seems like it's on topic.
I think so. Especially there's even something that they use the term ghosting when it comes to identity theft as well. So
see, we are on topic. Unfortunately, we did not do costumes this year. So.
Yeah, maybe another time.
Maybe next time. Exactly.
Yes. Yep. So today we're talking about reasons to protect a deceased estate. Doesn't seem like maybe that would always be an issue. So today we're going to explain actually why it is an issue. So protecting a deceased estate, oftentimes we find fraud protection. We have fraud protection in place for us when we're alive because we're constantly monitoring our credit. But many families don't understand that they may also want to protect the identity of their loved one after their loved one isn't here anymore. It's a bigger problem than we realize. And that by protecting an identity of your loved one, it can actually protect you and your family moving forward, especially if the surviving family member is a spouse, and especially in community property states. So there's a few things we're going to throw into the mix here to educate why it's such a big deal for us.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
So this is a statistic that I quote often, and this is just a screenshot of NBC News, but, you know, identity thieves are robbing 2.5 million deceased individuals every year. So they're taking their information, they're using it. So this could be family members, this could be professional identity thieves, all sorts of things that, you know, once that person has passed away, they are big hit. In fact, I saw another study that about a third of identity theft happens against someone who's deceased. And not only is it a problem for the estate, but think about those poor surviving family members. You know, they're grieving the loss of their loved one, and now they have someone using their loved one's information in the wrong way. And that can really put an extra burden on their grief. And not to mention, it can be costly and it can really mess things up for those survivors.
Absolutely. It's a scary thing, and we actually see it more often than we think, that we'll see it as we're helping families in our line of work. So
Absolutely.
It's a scary thing. So we offer through our service-based aftercare program some fraud protection services to help give the families peace of mind. So we talk through a lot of different things with families, but some of that is we can place a fraud alert through TransUnion. That's something you can do while you're alive too, but what it does is it notifies if there's some suspicious activity, so that it doesn't allow credit to be processed without authorization. So the other thing we recommend is to close down their credit completely by notifying the credit bureaus. And so there's also a way to do that.
It's interesting when we talk about this because we're helping families completely close down those credit accounts, which they should do. But often people say, well, then why do I need a fraud alert if we're already closing down those accounts? So what do we tell them? What do we tell them on that?
Well, we talk about what we're talking about today is the identity theft that can happen. And if you can get an alert that says something is trying to go through, or something is trying to happen, then that can help you stay on top of avoiding some of these problems.
Yeah. And closing down deceased credit is a process. It takes time, and it doesn't always work the first time. So oftentimes it comes back, it's rejected. You have to provide more information, and you want that protection from day one. It's one of the reasons why we ask our clients to be able to reach out to the family right away, because we want to get those fraud protections in place before there's a problem and things are triggered down the road.
One thing about closing down their credit by notifying the credit bureaus, families have a misunderstanding sometimes where they think that if we notify, it automatically closes all accounts.
Right.
It does not close all accounts. What it does is stop any new credit from being issued.
That's exactly right. So if a new creditor is trying to open up an account, or someone's trying to open up an account in their deceased name, then it will notify them, hey, this can't be open. This person's passed away, which is the whole purpose for this, right? It's mostly for lenders who are looking into those accounts and trying to issue credit, that they can be notified of that. It's not going to automatically close down all the accounts, and they can't do that because there are processes to legally close down accounts, and things have to be turned over to the heirs, and so it's a one-way street. It doesn't go back the other way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we also facilitate in trying to avoid fraud by stopping any credit card and insurance offers that are coming in the mail. If you're suddenly not checking your loved one's mailbox and they end up with 12 of these things, it's so easy for them to be swiped right out of the mail, filled out and turned back in, just an address change. That is why we do an opt-out of those types of offers. And then we also can get rid of some junk mail, a lot of it. Not all of it, and I can tell you what we can't. But we notify through the Deceased Registry, the Direct Marketers Association, to remove the name from all of their mailing lists. Now, if the loved one is opted into, they gave some money to Pets of the USA, you know what I mean? Like they're getting calendars every year because they donated. Those you have to notify separately, those types of programs.
Yeah, Bob's Bakery, they're not getting their list from the Direct Marketers Association, right?
No, it's procured locally, and so those ones have to be notified individually. But
I've talked a lot about this stopping the junk mail. It's such an easy thing to have happen, and it is so meaningful for those family members, especially when you have a surviving spouse. I've talked to so many widows who, every time they go to the mailbox, it is like this gut-wrenching thing. Here's this mail for Doug, and Doug's passed away, and it really is an emotional burden on them, and it can trigger a lot of feelings and difficulties every day that they get the mail. And so, not only do we want to stop that, but we also want to stop those pre-approved credit card offers, because someone picks that up. I mean, I get those credit card offers all the time, and everyone does, right? And you just got to sign it, send it back, and boom, identity's been stolen. And it happens a lot with family members. So making sure that widow is protected, she's not seeing that junk mail come through, is so important. Most people, when I tell them this, they're like, well, can you do this for me? And I was like, yeah, we just need to kill you first.
But actually, it's the junk mail you have to have passed away. The stopping of the credit card and insurance offers, anybody can do. So that's something.
That's true.
Yeah, you go to optoutprescreen.com. You can get rid of them for yourself if you would like, which is entirely beneficial if you're just tired of them and you have enough credit cards you don't want to worry about more. So
right.
Yeah.
And if anyone listening wants the link to any of these things are not secret. They are things we are happy. What we do is not secret. It's out there. It's just having someone take care of it for you while you're grieving is what our value is. So if anyone wants this, if they're not using our system or our process for their families, please email me. I'll be happy to send you these links. These things are really easy to do for a family and will make a huge difference in protecting them.
Absolutely. I'm just going to do a shout out. We have Ange who has given us a hello. And
hey, Ange.
Yes, we also have Lily and Michael. Hey guys, how are you? These are familiar names to us. So
yes.
Awesome. Here's the ghosting I mentioned earlier. Ghosting is not just when you're on a dating app and they stop, messaging you. It's actually a term that has been adopted nationally for this type of deceased person identity theft. So the things they look for to try and get this information, anything that has the full name of the deceased, the date of birth and the date of death, the place of birth and place of death, anything with their home address, cell phone number, email. This is why some people choose not to put obituaries up, because it lists education history and employment sometimes and military history, and then the names of family members. So some people choose not to put an obituary up or to leave some key factors out so that it's not quite as specific.
Right.
Yeah.
And no one can stop 100% of this, even if you don't do an obituary, right? Like information is out there. And today it seems like every other week, some company got hacked with their information. And so information gets out there. For my dad, we actually talked about this when he passed away. Well, do we want his information out there? We felt like it was important to still honor him and do an obituary. But if you're going to do that, the obituary had all of this information,
Yeah.
right? And so we had to do other steps to make sure that they were also protected, and that his estate and his name and his identity were also protected.
Absolutely. Um, I think next we're going to start talking about the kind of scams that are out there, just to make everyone aware of. It's people who are related to the deceased, unfortunately, is probably the most prevalent kind of thing. Somebody, they have easy access to their ID, to their social security number, even their tax records. Caretakers that are hired privately. We've seen this type of thing happen with that as well. But there are legitimate scams that are out there that we need to be aware of so that we can avoid them. So one of them is funeral assistance scams. So this, we saw an uptick during COVID because of FEMA, where they would get a phone call from FEMA, which is never how it happens. I mean, you have to apply to FEMA if your loved one passed from COVID. And the scammers would reach out as FEMA and pretend to be the government FEMA, and then ask for all of those, personal information so that they would have it all. Yeah, that was a pretty bad one.
Yeah, because it was this unique situation where FEMA was paying some costs for anyone who had, or covering some funeral costs for anyone who had passed away due to COVID. And we just hadn't seen anything to that scale before nationally, where FEMA was stepping in with funeral costs. And so many people were available to it, but they didn't really know how to claim it. In fact, we had funeral homes calling us all the time at the beginning, trying to figure out how to help families claim it. But just know, the government is never going to call you really for anything to offer you benefits, right? Everything's through an application process. So this one was a nasty one, and it really played on what was going on in the news, and then just immediately adapted to those poor families. And so this is why it's important to partner with a company that is in this all the time. A service-based aftercare type company that can help update your staff, the funeral directors and the hospice social workers, so that they can make people aware. If you get a call from someone, don't talk to them until you talk to me first, because I'll let you know if it's legit or not.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember with any government agency, they're not going to call you and request your personal information. They're
Right.
never going to do that.
They're
If you
not
get a
gonna do
phone call from FEMA or Social Security or the IRS, that's just not their process.
it. Right. Exactly.
So that's the best thing to remember about that.
Mm-hmm.
Outstanding debt. So this is something we help families notify, just so that they're not trying to call on debt. It's really easy to get wrong phone numbers. There are companies out there that will have a phone number that's the same as American Express, that is one number different. So if you misdial, then
Yep.
all of a sudden you are on a phone call that has a different message than you would originally hear. There's all kinds of things like that. That's one level. But another level is that scammers will look at obituaries and reach out and try and get them to pay the debt that isn't real.
Yep.
It's pretty scary.
Yep. And when it is real, just most of the time, some of those real debtors are also pretty aggressive in trying to get loved ones to pay debts that they are not responsible for. So even though that's not technically in the realm of like identity theft, I feel like it's still pretty scammy that a lot of these credit card companies and things are trying to get families to pay debts that they're not responsible for. So it's really important that families have someone who can look at their information and let them know, hey, in this case, you are responsible for it. In this case, you're not. And kind of what that background is, because most of those creditors, you're going to tell them to pound sand, right?
Yes.
So, right, it says here, it's important to know your community property laws. when you're on the hook, when you're not on the hook, what you've signed up for. And yeah, these outstanding debt things, I mean, they're getting really good at mimicking. The other day, I had a notification from Facebook for our business Facebook account saying that we needed to submit some information to keep our postings up and live. And yeah, it was totally a scam. It wasn't from Facebook at all, right?
Oh man.
And so I was like, oh, we're gonna lose our account. We better hurry and do this. And then double looked at it, and yeah, it was for sure fraud. So the sad thing is that these types of frauds are being, these debt things are scary. You get a call from them, whether it's real or not. It's really, really scary. And it's really important to have someone with you who can kind of help you navigate this and understand if this is legit, if you have to pay, if you don't have to pay, because now there's non-legit people calling.
Yes, exactly. And when we talk to families, we also communicate about community property laws. So there are 9 different states, I think it's 9, that actually the spouse can be responsible for the debt of their spouse who has passed away. So this is where the fraud that can happen can really affect financially and daily living and how they move forward for the next of kin if it's a surviving spouse.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Medicare scams. Again, Medicare is never going to reach out to you to make sure that you have everything in place. You might get calls from the healthcare insurance people who want to make sure you're on a plan. You know what I mean? That's different. But Medicare themselves are not going to reach out to you specifically.
No.
Yeah. So just don't even worry about those. I mean, if you have someone call, it's going to be treated the same as the FEMA or the Social Security or IRS.
Well, and this is particularly understandable because, hey, I just lost my spouse. I know that creates a life event, so something has to happen with insurance. And so it seems reasonable for Medicare to be reaching out, confirm that information to make sure I'm set up on my new plan. They're just not that helpful. Right?
They're not.
They're not. So do not give information, if you've lost a spouse in particular, to anyone over the phone who's calling in and asking for that information. They're just not that helpful. You really want someone who is helping you navigate through this, who knows this information, because it's scary how many just dishonest people are out there and taking advantage of someone who this seems completely reasonable.
Yeah. I actually have a story. Just yesterday, I have a son who is high functioning autism, and he often rides the bus by himself. He is very good at that, to go places, and he's pretty, he gets around. Yesterday, he came home and he said, Mom, there was a guy on the bus who was talking to me about Medicare and Social Security benefits, and he asked for my Social Security number. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is on city transportation.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm so glad that he did not give that to him.
Yeah.
On the bus. I mean, because it
Yeah.
can happen not just on a phone call coming into you. It can happen anywhere.
Right. Exactly. So please be careful on that. In fact, we actually had a funny story the other way. We had a sheriff once call us because the family, or the widow that we were helping, had a little bit of dementia. And so we had helped her close out the accounts. And then her son, she couldn't quite explain it, but she said, I talked to someone on the phone and we talked about Social Security and all these things. And the son kind
he
of
was
freaked out.
alarmed.
Yeah. So he called, rather than call us or call the funeral home, they called the sheriff's office. And as soon as the sheriff found out, had to talk to him directly. And he said, wow, what a great service this is, because I see so many seniors get scammed because they just don't know what those next steps are. And he goes, I'm going to tell everyone that this funeral home is taking care of their families and making sure that someone is protecting them through this. So, because it's scary. It happens a lot.
Yeah, more often than you think, actually.
Yep.
Tax fraud. Again, the IRS is not going to call you. They're going to send you threatening letters that will come in the mail, and those are plenty scary.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but this is something that really happens. These con artists will call They'll demand taxes. They'll say you have to pay now or you're going to go to jail. I mean, they
Right.
can be very, very, very scary.
And they sound convincing. And once
Mhm.
again, it's just like with insurance. Well, I know that mom or dad or my spouse just passed away. So it seems reasonable that this is going to impact taxes. It does. And you can file taxes right then, but you really don't have to till the next year, right? So there are some things that have to happen with taxes. You have to, if they've been filing, you're going to have to file that last time, and you might have to, get a tax ID number for the trust because now it's its own entity. It's not tied to a social security number. There are a few things that have to happen with taxes. A tax professional will help you do that, but none of that's going to be so urgent that the IRS would call you and demand money,
Yeah.
right? They never do that. Always go through a tax professional who's going to help you figure out what exactly your state owes on taxes, if anything, um, because you want it done right. So if anyone calls you about taxes at all, out of the blue, I would just hang up.
Yeah. That's great advice, actually.
Yep.
Romance or compassion scams. So we've actually had a little bit of experience with this when I have helped families asking, what do we do? Mom now has this new boyfriend who's 20 years younger than her, and we don't like him, and we can tell he's doing things to try and take over part of an estate. It can get pretty scary when it seems like a real relationship or a friendship that can give access to this individual who is portraying friendliness when they're not.
Right. So this can happen with death or without death.
Yes.
But is highly targeted to seniors, and can be really difficult. Unfortunately, if you want to completely lock this down from your spouse, or from a parent, so the first spouse passes away, you would have to go and like declare them incompetent in order to
Yep.
stop them from making decisions. They'll probably still have access to their own funds without doing that. And so this is something that you really want to look at in pre-planning, right? Creating an irrevocable trust, for example, where money can't be pulled out of that trust anymore, especially if you're someone with assets. That's going to stop a scam like this in its tracks, possibly getting the police involved if you absolutely can. But this one's hard because people do have the ability to gift their loved ones, including a romantic relationship, money. So this one's very, very hard to stop. It's very difficult for the extended family members, because I want to support mom, but this person is clearly only there for the money. So it's a sticky situation. I've seen families completely destroyed because of this scam artist coming in. So creating a plan beforehand is the very best thing. Making sure that things can't be moved around as easily, and that money is going directly to the heirs and not to a new boyfriend is probably really important. But this one is, I think, one of the harder ones to fight.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I agree with you that the pre-planning, if you know your loved one has a diagnosis of something like dementia or Alzheimer's, or there's a number of things that can cause a decline, a mental decline, make sure you have the proper things in place and that you've planned so that something like this can't happen. And it's sad that a lot of times this happens in that short window when we don't realize there's a problem with our loved one's health to when it's completely obvious.
Right.
So,
And sometimes they're direct, like this shows here, right? Sometimes they might be asking directly for money or put things into my name, we can do like a joint or whatever. And sometimes you're right, they are more coy about it. Just tell me about your husband. And it might even, there's not always romance, right? It just could be compassion. Yeah, tell me all about him. They're pumping for information. It could be a young nurse, who's in that person's life, getting that information to then go commit identity theft. And so,
yeah,
it's a tough one. It's
Yeah.
a really tough one to fight.
It really is. Delinquent life insurance. So this one, I personally haven't seen quite as often, but I know that it happens. So the scammers will contact a bereaved family member and claim there's a generous payout included with their deceased person's policy, but then say they were behind some payments, so I need you to pay me these outstanding premiums. And this is a scam basically built on fear and ignorance.
Right.
It's not a good one at all.
Yeah. So, I mean, talking about this, unclaimed life insurance is really important, right?
Mhm.
So, I think in New York alone, the state of New York alone, like $900 million of unclaimed life insurance got turned over to the state a couple years ago. And that was just for that
Lot.
1 year.
That's a
So
lot.
there's a lot that goes unclaimed. And one of the most difficult part is not just unclaiming it or unclaimed property, unclaimed life insurance, I should say, but the delinquent life insurance, right? So if you have a whole life policy, you can stop paying those fees as long as there's enough value in that. And we're not going to get really in depth today on how life insurance and whole life policies work. But if at some point the amount in that account goes too low, then you do have to pay this. And I think the saddest thing for us is the family was told, yes, I have this whole life policy. It's totally in place. It was delinquent. We call upon death. And guess what? It's done. You can't go back and make up, oh, yeah, I'll hurry and give you $100 and they're going to pay you a $200,000 life insurance. They're not going to do that.
No,
Right.
it's
And
sad.
so they're especially not going to call you to get you to claim life insurance and get caught up in your payments, especially after a death has occurred. If it's delinquent when the death occurs, it's done. You can't get that policy back. And
No.
I could be wrong. Someone can reach out and tell me if I'm wrong. I've never seen them be able to get that policy back, right? Life insurance companies do not do that. So having a claim on this seems like, oh, there's a big pile of cash and it's so specific to what I'm going through. Listen, today with AI and all the technology, they know exactly what's going on in your life and their scams are going to mimic that. So like we talked about insurance, it seems reasonable. With taxes, IRS, it seems reasonable because this is an event. With life insurance, oh, they had this policy. I didn't know about it. This is great because now it's kind of playing on my greed. I want to get that money. And it was delinquent. It's not. So working with an estate specialist, someone who can help you determine if a life insurance policy is in effect or not and help you claim that, that's going to be the best route of going around it. Do not give someone money in order to catch up a life insurance policy. It's not going to be real.
No, never.
Yep.
No. All right. Credit card scams. With enough information, scammers can use your loved one's identity to open up new lines of credit, apply for loans, rack up all kinds of unlawful charges. And it can go unnoticed because nobody is checking the credit history of the person they've just lost. That is not top of mind, not top priority when we are grieving and dealing with all of the next steps. And that is another reason why a service like ours can get in there and help them avoid some of these types of scams, and along with our fraud protection
Right.
and notifying the credit bureaus.
Right. So with this one, probably the biggest perpetrator of this are family members.
Yeah.
Right. They
Sadly.
they see that credit card, they're using it when they shouldn't, they're not actually on that account. Family members, sometimes not meaning to commit fraud, are committing fraud
Mhm.
because they say things like, well, I have power of attorney, right? Power of attorney extinguishes upon death. Like you can't represent someone who's passed away.
Yep.
That's just what it is legally. And so power of attorney no longer functions afterwards, including using their accounts, using credit cards, things like that. Now, if you were already a signer on that account, if it was a joint account, or if you're already a signer on that account, yeah, you're okay to still use those credit cards, but don't use the deceased person's credit card, right? But you might not be the only one. So with no one monitoring those accounts, super scary, especially if it's just in that person's name. We usually suggest for credit cards, if it's only in that person's name, we're going to shut it down immediately. If it's a joint account, we probably don't need to shut it down. Depending if they still want those benefits, we just need to destroy the deceased person's card and then the joint person can still use it because they're just responsible for those bills as anyone else. So it's really kind of a case-by-case basis that they need to look at. But you're exactly right here. You got to be aware of what's going on. Get to this quickly. This is one of those things you need to start talking about probably within the first 2 weeks of that person passing away, and making sure the accounts that need to be shut down are shut down, and the ones that are kept open are being monitored.
Yep, absolutely. Here's a slide about family members. We've kind of touched on this. I have had personal experience where there is one of the children who has taken all the credit cards and the ID and the Social Security card, and they're suddenly gone out of the house. You would be amazed what some people would do when they're feeling desperation of their own situation. Sadly, we've had some very, very sad situations when it comes to this idea.
Social Security benefits, veterans benefits that shouldn't be claimed, or those checks shouldn't be cashed anymore. Those are issues, right? Not terribly anymore with Social Security like it used to be, because the reporting system is much better, but
yeah,
super sad. Family members, it's a big temptation, right?
Yeah.
And people feel entitled, and they feel like it's a victimless crime because dad's gone. I can just use this information, especially those instances where there's one of the kids who was doing kind of going extra mile and taking care of mom or dad, and the other siblings weren't. And so they just feel, I have the power of attorney. I feel like I can do these things, and you can't. People will ask me directly all the time, especially with like accounts. Well, do I need to tell my siblings about this? Or
yes,
right. When I fill out this paperwork, can I leave this part off? Right. Or whatever. Like they don't need to know about these things because I have these expenses. I'm entitled to this money. I'm entitled to help this, or I'm kind of desperate. I really need it. And every time I have to say, you would be committing fraud.
Yes.
If you leave things off the affidavit of small estate, you're committing fraud, right? And that is a crime. So don't do it, no matter how much justification you feel like there is. That just do things the right way.
Yes, absolutely. It's a big encompassing problem. So there's so many things that play into how this type of identity theft happens. There's so many things that we can check the boxes of to make sure we avoid it. But there are things that are out of our control. And so once you do see that type of theft, there are ways to report it to the credit agencies so that they in turn can go after who is doing the theft themselves. Even with our clients, we've had a few really sticky situations with clients who have accidentally released too much information. And this will go unnamed, but we had a client who somehow the obituary was printed with the Social Security number in the obituary with all of the other pertinent information. That had to get through the funeral home copy reading, the family copy reading, the newspaper. Like it just failed on every level imaginable. And this funeral home called us sick. They were sick. They said, I don't know how this happened. We immediately called the family within a day of passing. It was really fast. Like, let's get this fraud protection up for you guys. We're going to make sure that if any fraud does happen, because we so kindly gave scammers everywhere the Social Security number, we were able to step in. And as far as I know, to this date, we stepped in quick enough that nothing ever happened with that.
That's wonderful.
But those types of failures can be a perfect storm, and things can happen that we don't mean to happen. It can be scary. So making sure you proofread that obituary before you put it up, make sure it's what you want. If you use a service like ours, we're going to help identify any outstanding debts and notify financial institutions and those debts to make sure they're aware. We're going to do all of those things to help make sure we don't end up with any identity theft. We'll also contact home, auto, mortgage, life insurance, so that the family, when they get a call that is fraud, they're already going to know we took care of it. Right. Same with Social Security and the VA. There's just so many pieces that we can do. And when all of those pile together, it creates those extra layers to really ensure that the fraud just won't happen.
Right. And I think that there's a pendulum here, right? So on the one side, you don't want to be naive that fraud's never going to happen, and so I'm not going to worry about it at all. Also, on the other side, people being too concerned with that. So, there's the story of my wife's boss. She teaches ballet, and the owner of the ballet studio, her husband passed away, and my wife Marquesa called me, and she goes, "Will you call her and offer your services?" So I got her on the phone, and I was, "Clyde, I don't know if you know what I do for a living, but I help close out estates from someone who's passed away. I'm happy to help you." And she's like, "Oh, that sounds wonderful. I'm just at the bank. I need to run, but why don't we call a little bit later?" And I was like, "Clyde, turn around and walk out the door right now." She's like, "What?" I'm like, "Turn around, walk out the door right now." And I was like, "Were you going to tell them about your husband passing away?" And she was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Clyde, that account is probably tied to your business account, to your payroll, to how you accept money, all those things." And she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Look, we want to close down all the other things, but this one, we need to wait until we can transition it quickly, because all the bank's going to do is they're going to freeze it. And it might be months before you're able to open something else up. So you won't be able to pay your employees. You won't be able to receive money in without going to a judge. And so it's going to create a mess. And so there's kind of this fine line. You don't want to be so stressed out about it that like you're being rash and making these, jumping into things that don't need to be done too soon. Right. And all of a sudden you've created more mess for you, and you don't want to not be aware of it. You really want someone to come through, make sure that these are the right people to contact, make those contacts and those notifications quickly, and then ignore all of those solicitors and all of those scammers and all those other people, right? Just protect yourself. And so if you're not using service-based aftercare in your funeral home or your hospice, hopefully your staff is trained to be able to help families get through those first steps. It's not a lot, but a little bit of prevention goes a long way, right? It's, what is it? An ounce of prevention is a pound of cure.
Yes.
So a little bit of helping that family up front, making sure that they feel secure and safe, and then they can take care of the bigger issues with the time that you need to take care of them, and you're protected from all these other minor issues.
And I would also add that there are families out there that are so paranoid about fraud that they perceive things that are normal process as fraud. So,
True.
for instance, most of the big banks and big credit card companies have estate departments. They look for obituaries. They look for, they're closing accounts. They're doing that. So us notifying the credit bureaus does not cause those types of freezes on accounts or credit cards not working. And so sometimes the really paranoid are creating way more trouble for themselves because they're so stressed about it. They just need to step back a little and realize that it's okay. We can work through it.
I had a family, and the son was so paranoid. He's like, we get to the first thing and we're like, okay, well, let's set up fraud protection. No. I don't want TransUnion to know my dad's information. Well, TransUnion already knows your dad's information. We're just making sure that they don't give his credit score to anyone who's lending. No, you can't. I don't want you to do it. Okay. Well, let's do the deceased registry so that no one will like lend in his name or do pre-approved credit card offers. No. I don't want all of them to know my dad's information. Once again, they already know it, right? This is making sure that they're not issuing it to the wrong people. And it was funny how paranoid he was. Like, no one can know my dad's information. And it's like, it's out there, right? Yeah. Our information is out there. So now we just need to protect it and make sure it goes through the right channels to protect it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And what we don't want to see, and this is the story, someone I helped years ago when I was an estate specialist, is the spouse wasn't aware that fraud had already been happening for many months on her husband's credit. So when we started helping her, it pulled up this huge list of credit cards that she knew nothing about. Right. Nothing. And all of it was a community property state. So she was responsible for all of those. And she had to go and file complaints and say, these aren't mine, these weren't his. And it was very, very difficult.
Yeah, especially because the husband's not there to testify
Yeah.
that, he had nothing to do with any of that.
Yeah. And there was some of those. Luckily, the balances were manageable. But some of the balances were pretty high, and there was no way she could pay for that living on Social Security income. And it created a huge amount of stress for her.
Yeah. I had another sad situation with a dishonest husband who had basically taken their life savings and gambled it away. He was an addictive gambler, did online day trading and things. And then he had gone and taken out credit cards in his wife's name because his were all maxed out. His credit was so bad. So the last we counted was 54 credit cards in their name.
Gosh.
Well, all of the signatures on it in her name were fraudulent. And so we had to work with police. We had to file a report and show that these were fraudulent applications, that it was all hidden. And we were able to get almost all of it done, taken care of. I wasn't able to go through that whole process with her, but it was later reported that most of that debt was being able to be erased, but mostly because there was nothing left in the estate that they could go after. She unfortunately was left with nothing with her and her children, young, tragic death. But yeah, fraud hurts people and they need to be protected.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, we'll open it up if there's anyone who wants to ask any questions. We'll be watching the chat for the next few minutes as we share a few more things. I had a family once who they were super afraid, like the family that you were talking about, like you can't notify anybody. And within a few days, they had the bank account was frozen and a whole bunch of things. So it was that automatic notification that happens through these larger entities. But they were so angry, they came back to us and said, you guys must have done this. And sometimes it just takes a lot of education to walk families through of the process. And when we lose a loved one, it's really easy to exist in the fear of not knowing what to do next. And sometimes that fear can snowball into all kinds of ideas, especially if someone is naturally a little paranoid or naturally looking for these types of situations. And that's okay. That they probably guard themselves from a lot of things that maybe other people don't by thinking that way. But it's really important to understand process and to trust some of the process as well. And so a service like ours can really help families in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having that peace of mind to know that your information is protected and that your loved one's information is protected. I think I've gotten too many calls from people that didn't use our service, and it's a year later and someone has stolen dad's identity and there's this mess and boy, what a tragic thing to have happen. I'm just so mad at these scammers. I'm just so mad. How dare you pick on these grieving families with everything else that they have to deal with? How can your greed allow you to take advantage of these families? It's sickening. And it's not always in our country, right? It's from all over the world that they're targeting these seniors. They're targeting grieving families. So funeral homes and hospices and law firms, you have the responsibility. Your families are depending on you. And if you're not doing anything for aftercare, if you're not doing anything to protect that family from fraud, I don't think that's right. I think that you need to be in there and protect them. They are expecting, a family comes to a funeral home needing someone to take them through this process of losing their loved one. And it's true, you can't do everything for that family, but you can take care of the body. You can help them on their path through grief, and you can help them with these basic estate issues, which are going to protect them in the long term. It doesn't take that much work to really help these families, and it will make a huge difference for them. Families appreciate it so much when the funeral home or the hospice is willing to go that extra mile and make sure that family is protected from these bad actors out there.
Yep. We do have a question. What happens if there is fraud? How do you contest it?
You want to start on that one?
I can. You can reach out to any one of the 3 large credit bureaus and actually file that there is fraud that has happened. And so there are procedures in place. If it's through your bank account, you can contact your bank. If it's a credit card, you can go through the credit bureaus, but you can also call the credit card company and say, this card is fraudulent. I did not apply for this.
Yeah.
Every one of those levels have processes on
Yeah.
how to take care of fraudulent accounts.
And one thing that helped with the few people I've helped through this, so I'm not as experienced as you are, Nikki, but the few people that I've helped through this, I know getting a police report on it was super helpful when they were making the claim with the credit card company, showing, hey, these credit card charges happened after Doug passed away, right? No one had access to that. So this is fraudulent behavior. It's not recurring charge or anything like that. And once they got that police report in, really helped with fighting the credit card companies or fighting, the bank or whoever when it exists. And sometimes you can, and sometimes it just is what it is. And so just depends on the situation. It can get pretty sticky depending on what type of fraud has happened. And oftentimes if it's a family member who stole that information, then you're even more sticky, because if you get a police report, they're going to prosecute that person.
Yeah,
right. And
they are.
so now you feel like you're turning in your loved one, and unfortunately that is what it is. Fraud is fraud, and it should be reported.
Yep. Every time.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, do you have anything else to add? Any other thoughts, Matt, about identity theft and fraud?
No, except for I just want to thank our state specialists. We're helping, thousands of families, tens of thousands of families per year. And these estate specialists work so hard on our team to take care of these family members. And at the end of the day, I don't know if there's been a report of anyone that we've helped who's been affected by fraud of any items that we knew about, right? Sometimes there's an account that the family didn't know about, we didn't know about, and it got impacted. But I think that we've been able to protect literally tens of thousands of families per year from fraud. And that is because of the hard work of these wonderful state specialists. So round of applause to them, round of applause to our team members and anyone else who is going the extra mile. I know it's not just us. There are social workers out there who are educating themselves on this. There are funeral directors, and there are so many people who are helping these families be taken care of and deal with this kind of scary situation, right? Back to the Halloween theme. It's a scary situation, and it doesn't have to be when the family has an individual that's willing to be there and help them through that.
Amen to all of that.
Yeah. Okay, and also it looks like on YouTube we have posted all the links for those tools that you can use to help families. So please use them.
Yeah, if you want to opt out of those credit card insurance offers, anybody can do that. They're annoying and they're a fraud risk even while you're alive, especially when it's for one of your loved ones who have passed. And then we also put the deceased registry on there too. So Get rid of all that junk mail.
Okay. Well, thank you. When's our next one?
All right. We have the next live is going to be November 13th at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And that will be a house service-based aftercare actively helps families. And we're going to be interviewing one of our estate specialists who have been here with us the longest. And her name is Kathy Mills. And she's going to be on here to share stories. And she is full of stories. So
Wonderful.
It'll be entertaining.
Okay, great. Looking forward to it. See you in a couple weeks.
Okay.
Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween.
Okay, bye.